As we light the peace candle this morning, it seems as though true peace in our families, among our neighbors, in our communities, our nation, and our world is nothing but God's impossible dream, as dark and conflicted as life around us seems to be these days. But God isn't found only in vast visions. God is also the God of small things, including small actions of politeness and kindness. Nowadays, in the time of COVID isolation and brutal political strife, these small actions may be truly holy and truly peace-giving. Here is a poem called Small Kindnesses by Danusia Limaris. It was printed in the New York Times Sunday magazine a few months ago. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers will say, "Bless you," when someone sneezes. A leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it. To smile at them and for them to smile back. For the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first," or "I like your hat." During these conflicted times, let our small actions open paths to peace. And now let's join in prayer for illumination. Eternal God, in the reading of the Scripture, may your word be heard. In the meditation of our hearts, may your word be known. And in the faithfulness of our lives, may your word be shown. Amen. The scripture reading today is from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 20th chapter, verses 1 through 16, truly one of Jesus' most challenging parables. I'll be reading from the Message version of the Bible. Hear the word of God. God's kingdom is like an estate manager who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. They agreed on a wage of $1 a day and went to work. Later, about 9 o'clock, the manager saw some other men hanging around the town square, unemployed. He told them to go work in his vineyard and he would pay them a fair wage. They went. He did the same thing at noon and again at 3 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, he went back and found still others standing around. He said, "Why are you standing around all day doing nothing?" They said, "Because no one hired us." He told them to go work in his vineyard. And when the day's work was over, the owner of the vineyard instructed his foreman, "Call the workers in and pay them their wages. Start with the last hired and go on to the first." Those hired at 5 o'clock came up and were each given $1. When those who were hired first saw that, they assumed they would get far more. But they got the same each one of them $1. Taking the dollar, they groused angrily to the manager. "These last workers put in only 1 easy hour, and you just made them equal to us who slaved all day under a scorching sun." He replied to the one speaking for the rest, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. We agreed on the wage of $1, didn't we? So take it and go. I decided to give to the one who came last the same as you. Can't I do what I want with my own money? Are you going to get stingy because I am generous?" Here it is again, the great reversal, many of the first ending up last and the last first. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church today.
Will you please pray with me? Oh God, come to us in the quietness of the places where we find ourselves at this very moment. Center our hearts and our minds on you and you alone. Open us to the power and to the presence of your Holy Spirit, and remind us that your love, mercy, and grace come to us unasked for and free. Amen. I am the youngest of 5 children, which means that I am quite familiar with the expression, "It's not fair." More times than I want to admit, I uttered those words growing up, typically resulting from one or more of my older brothers receiving what I thought was special treatment or privileges. For those of you who have older siblings, I'm sure you commiserate with me. While being the youngest in a family has its advantages, that's not necessarily the case in the early years. Fairness is where everyone is treated equally, showing no bias, partiality, privilege, or special consideration. It is important for us to show respect to all people and follow the rules, whether they are written and established or whether they're unwritten and just courteous. For example, if you stop at an ice cream shop and you stand in line, fairness is waiting your turn based upon who arrived first. But the concept of fairness can be complicated. If you work for your employer for 20 years, would it be fair if you were paid the exact same amount of money as the person who was just hired? Oh, I know what you're thinking, that you work 20 years, gives you more experience, and therefore there should be a premium for your longevity. Oh, well, what if the job doesn't require any special knowledge or skill, and you're working just like the other person? Are we being fair? So Jesus is telling us yet another parable with a surprise ending. Barbara Brown Taylor writes this: "The parable of the laborers in the vineyard is a little like cod liver oil. You know Jesus is right, you know it must be good for you, but that does not make it any easier to swallow. It is so radical that it offends because it seems to reward those who have done the least, while it sends those who have worked the hardest to the end of the line." As Eugene Peterson in the Message writes, "Here it is again, the great reversal, many of the first ending up last and the last first." Is that fair? Today's scripture reading that Rod just read lays out the story. It was late September when the grapes would be ripe in Palestine. It was a race against time. The grapes had to be harvested before the October rains. So every available person in the community would be employed for a day or two to help out. Kind of reminds me of potato harvesting time in Aroostook County, Maine, where they actually shut down the school for 2 weeks the end of September. So here we are, early in the morning. The estate manager goes to the marketplace to find able-bodied workers. He promises to pay the workers well for their efforts. And after a couple of hours, the manager realizes that he needs more workers. Time's running out. So he returns to the marketplace and finds some men hanging around the town square. And he offers them employment. They gladly accept. "I will pay you a fair wage," he tells them. So off they go to work. Later, he realizes that he still needs more workers. So at noon, and again at 3 o'clock, he hires more. He's still not going to make it. Even with all these additional workers, all of the grapes would not be harvested. So at 5 o'clock, with only 1 hour of work left, he once again goes to the marketplace to hire workers. So far, so good. The trouble begins at quitting time. The workers who were hired at 5 o'clock and had worked only 1 hour in the cool of the evening, they were paid the usual daily wage. The workers who had worked all day long in the hot sun look on in amazement, and they began to think that, gee, if these workers had only worked 1 hour and gotten paid that much, then certainly they would receive more. After all, they had worked all day long. But they were in for a disappointment. In fact, they were outraged, for they received, the exact same amount as the ones who had only worked 1 hour. How dare the manager pay them the exact same amount of money for those that had worked so few hours? It's not fair. They felt cheated. Now, because this parable begins by comparing God's kingdom to an estate manager, we suspect initially that this is in some way a story about God after all. But as we read the story, we wonder what kind of God is lurking in these words of Jesus. Now, the manager deals fairly with one group, paying them exactly what they had bargained for after 12 hard hours in the hot sun. But then he turns around and he gives the exact same amount to those who had only put in 1 hour in the cool of the evening. Gee, an average child could seem to have a better grasp of fairness than the manager did. In fact, just today, Liz Jones said to me at morning prayer, when she taught this lesson to a Sunday school class, even one of the young kids jumped up and said, "That's not fair." Moreover, if the manager has anything to do with God, God must be short-sighted here. To those who had worked 12 hours and to those who worked 1 hour, the same pay? With this equal pay scheme, the manager did the most for those who did the least, and he did the least for those who had done the most. Now, all this logic and rationalization in the world doesn't remove this offense. It's not fair. But come on. This story is not about harvesting grapes, is it? This story is about grace. And it says loud and clear that grace cannot be earned. The workers in the vineyard expressed their outrage to the estate manager. These last had put in only 1 easy hour, they said, and you just made them equal to us who slaved all day in the scorching sun. Their reaction kind of takes the manager by surprise. Friend, the manager says to the disgruntled workers, I have not been unfair. We agreed on $1, didn't we? It was true. Of course, they had agreed on $1. They were paid what was promised. There was no cheating involved at all. Then he asked them an interesting question. Can't I do what I want with my own money? Jesus is not advocating pay scales here. He's practicing theology, not economics. But logic, whether it's economic or theological, escapes us, maybe even offends us. In this parable, we seem to be looking at both bad business and peculiar religion. At the heart of what bothers us most about this parable is this bizarre combination of fairness and generosity, a combination that seems all too unfair. It is the sense of inconsistency that troubles us based upon our prior and unspoken assumptions that we have. And if we are honest, come on now, let's be honest, we agree more with the complaints of the all-day workers than the action of the manager, don't we? Notice the protest. We worked all day, but they only put in 1 hour, and you made them equal to us. So, these workers want a merit pay. Now, the text says that the all-day workers went on to work after they had cut the deal with the manager. They bargained to make sure that they would get a good wage, what was due to them. But did you notice? Or perhaps you didn't notice. Go back and read that again. You see, the last group that was hired, they never asked about a wage. They simply went to work, lined up, whatever the manager would give them, they would take. Surprise! He gave them more than they could have ever reasonably expected, a full day's wage, the same as the top hands. But when the bargainers lined up, despite their great expectations, they got exactly what they negotiated for in their wage. Now, the most curious thing about this parable for Barbara Brown Taylor is where we locate ourselves in line. She writes, the story sounds quite different from the end of the line, after all, than it does from the front of the line. But isn't it interesting that 99% of us hear it from front row seats? We are the ones who have gotten the short end of the stick. We are the ones who have been cheated. We are the ones who have gotten up early and worked hard and stayed late. And for what? so that some backwards householder can come along and start at the wrong end of the line, treating us like the never-do-wells who don't even get dressed until noon. But you know, this parable is essentially about the generosity of God. It's not about equity or proper disbursements of wages, but it's about an undeserved gift. It is not about economic exchange, but rather about the bestowing of grace. The bestowing of grace and mercy to all, no matter what time they have put in or how deserving or undeserving we may think them to be. Let's face it, many of us wish this were not so. Those of us who have dedicated our lives to the church for years and years, we really want a bonus, don't we? It doesn't seem fair that anyone can simply just waltz in here at the last minute and claim the same benefits as those who have labored for decades. Some of us may balk at those who have not traveled with us during COVID-19 and joined our online congregation. Once we come back together. It's amazing how quick we are to judge other people's situations. We're not to judge. Let God figure out what's fair. You see, God's grace is an equal measure of love poured out on us, whether we have worked 12 years or 12 hours in the heat of the day, or whether we have worked 1 day or 1 hour in the cool of the evening. This text gives us good news about a generous God. No, it's not fair. The parable calls us to look at ourselves honestly and lovingly, as God does. It invites us to turn from holding grudges because things do not go our way, to let go of the stuff that our lives that keeps us from being joy-filled and grateful people. You see, gratefulness is at the heart of our faith. The good news that you and I are called upon to share broadly with others is that God's love is fairly given to all of us. Amen.